My 31F husband, 32M, has a mysterious sister I never knew about, and now I'm starting to question our whole marriage. Hey Reddit, I never thought I'd find myself writing out my life story to strangers on the internet, but I feel like I'm at a breaking point and could use some outside perspective. This might be a long one, so bear with me. My husband, Darren, and I have been married for 7 years, together for nearly a decade. We met in our early 20s when we were both broke, just starting out in our careers and trying to figure out what we wanted from life. Things moved quickly between us, and we were married within 2 years. Darren has always been the quiet, steady type. He's not the most emotionally expressive guy, but I always knew he loved me. Or at least I thought I did. Darren doesn't have much family. His parents passed away in a car accident when he was in his teens, and he grew up in foster care after that. He never really talked about those years, and I never pushed him. I figured he'd share things when he was ready. We built a life together, a nice little home, steady jobs, no kids yet, but we've been talking about starting a family soon. Everything seemed perfect, or as perfect as real life can get. But then a couple of months ago, something happened that's made me question everything. It started with a phone call. I was home on a Saturday morning, folding laundry, when Darren's phone rang on the kitchen counter. It was an unfamiliar number, but we often get spam calls, so I ignored it. But then it rang again, and finally, I picked it up thinking it might be something urgent. A woman's voice came through the line, sounding panicked. Darren, please, you have to talk to me. I need your help. She kept talking, but as soon as I said, "This is his wife," "Who is this?" she went completely silent. There was a pause, and then she mumbled, "I'm his sister," and hung up. Now, I've known Darren for almost 10 years, and in all that time, he's never mentioned a sister. He's never mentioned any family at all, outside of a distant aunt he used to visit when he was younger. My heart was racing, and my mind immediately went to the worst. Was he having an affair? Was this some woman calling him for a reason I didn't want to know? I sat there with his phone in my hands, trying to process what had just happened. When Darren came home that evening, I confronted him about the call. At first, he denied knowing anyone who would call him like that. But when I pressed him, he sighed and finally admitted that he does, in fact, have a half-sister named Nina. He said he hadn't seen her in years and that their relationship was complicated. He claimed he didn't tell me about her because they hadn't been in contact for so long, and he didn't think it mattered. I was stunned. This man, the person I thought I knew better than anyone, had a whole sibling that I knew nothing about. I asked him why she was calling, why she sounded so desperate, and all he would say was that she had issues and that he didn't want to get involved. He tried to brush it off, saying that it was better for our marriage if we just didn't get caught up in her problems. But he looked so uncomfortable, like he was hiding something more. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept turning over his words in my head, wondering what he wasn't telling me. I know I probably should have let it go, but I couldn't help myself. I started looking through his phone the next day when he was in the shower. I found a handful of text messages from the same number, messages that he had clearly tried to delete but hadn't gotten all of. Most of them were brief, things like, "Please, I need your help and you can't just ignore me." There was one that caught my attention. I didn't know where else to go. It felt like my world had tilted sideways. I started thinking about all the times Darren had gone on work trips over the past year. Trips that seemed to come out of nowhere, where he'd leave in a rush and come back looking exhausted. He'd always said that his job required it, and I'd never had a reason to doubt him. But now I was questioning everything. I decided to reach out to Nina myself. I knew it might be crossing a line, but I needed answers. I called the number back, and to my surprise, she answered almost immediately. I told her who I was, and at first she seemed reluctant to say anything. But eventually, she opened up, and what she told me has turned my entire world upside down. Nina told me that she and Darren grew up together, though they were separated after their parents died. She said that she fell in with the wrong crowd during her teenage years and ended up struggling with addiction. She'd been in and out of rehab for most of her 20s, and she admitted that she wasn't proud of the choices she'd made. But then she said something that caught me off guard. "Darren has been helping me for years. He's the only family I have left." According to Nina, Darren has been secretly supporting her for a long time. He's been paying for her rehab stays, helping her get on her feet when she relapsed, even covering rent when she couldn't make ends meet. She said that he used to visit her every few months, but recently, he'd cut off all contact, refusing to take her calls or respond to her messages. She said she didn't know why he'd suddenly changed, but that she was scared and she didn't know what else to do. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. On one hand, I was relieved that this wasn't some kind of affair. But on the other hand, I felt like I'd just uncovered this massive part of Darren's life that he'd hidden from me. I didn't know what to think. Was he trying to protect me from the pain of his sister's struggles? Or was he hiding it because he didn't trust me enough to share it? When Darren came home that evening, I confronted him again. I told him that I'd spoken to Nina, that I knew about the money, the rehab stays, everything. At first, he was furious that I'd gone behind his back, but then his anger melted into something else, something like resignation. He admitted that everything Nina said was true, that he'd been helping her ever since she first reached out to him 6 years ago. He said he kept it a secret because he was ashamed. He didn't want me to know that his sister had gone through such dark times, and he didn't want to drag me into the mess. He thought he could handle it all on his own. But then Nina had relapsed again last year, and he'd finally reached his breaking point. He cut her off, thinking that maybe it would force her to get her life together, but it only made things worse. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me understood why he might have kept this from me. He's always tried to be the strong one, the protector. But part of me felt deeply hurt that he thought I couldn't handle the truth. We've shared everything else, our hopes, our fears, our struggles. And yet he chose to shoulder this burden alone. It felt like he didn't trust me enough to let me in. I told Darren that I needed time to think, and for the past few weeks, I've been staying with my sister. We've been texting, and he's been going to therapy on his own, trying to work through everything he's buried for so long. He's asked me to come back, to start couples therapy with him, to try to rebuild the trust that's been shattered. I keep thinking about all the good years we had before this, about how much I love him, and how much I want to believe that we can get through this together. But I keep feeling like I'm looking at a stranger. I keep wondering what other secrets he's kept, what other parts of his life he's hidden from me, because he thought I couldn't handle it. I know addiction is a complicated, painful thing, and I feel for Nina, I really do. But I also feel like Darren's secrets have turned my life into a lie, and I don't know how to find my way back to the trust we used to have. Now I'm stuck in this weird limbo. I'm going to therapy on my own, trying to sort through my feelings, but I can't seem to make a decision. I keep wondering if it's worth trying to rebuild, or if some things are just too broken to be fixed. I haven't spoken to Nina again since that first conversation, but she's left me voicemails saying that she hopes I can forgive Darren and that she's sorry for everything. I feel like I'm drowning, and I don't know how to find my way back to the surface. Part of me thinks that maybe this is a sign that Darren is trying to change, that he's ready to be more open, to let me in. But part of me wonders if I'll always be looking over my shoulder, wondering what other secrets he might be keeping. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. I could really use some advice, especially from people who've been through something similar. Should I give Darren another chance? Can trust ever really be rebuilt after something like this? Or is it better to cut my losses and start over? TLDR, my husband secretly has a half-sister I never knew about, and he's been supporting her through addiction for years. He kept it hidden because he was ashamed and didn't want to involve me, but now that I know the truth, I'm struggling to decide if I can ever trust him again.